Well, that was beautiful. Thank you, Susie. You are a beautiful voice of Maui. Aloha, everyone. Welcome to the Neutral Zone. It is Monday at 11 a.m. here in Hawaii. We are so blessed to be here in Maui. I'm your host, Jason Schwartz. For those of you that can see me, you are on the net maybe, or maybe you're sitting at home. We're on Akaku Maui Community Media TV, channel 55 on cable. We're KAKU 88.5 FM, the voice of Maui, not to be confused with the talk of Maui. We're the voice of Maui, and we're very independent, and you'll hear by our unusual programming. This show is called The Neutral Zone, subtitled, It's Anything But Neutral, by design, because I like the idea that we can figure it all out if we all sit and talk and find out what we agree on, and those other things can fall away. Unless they're burning issues, and there should be nothing burning, as like we say. It's all small stuff, right? Don't sweat. I have a real interesting guest today on the show who many of you on this island know. He's actually a doctor, Dr. Santo Triolo, who many have seen as a counselor, mental health counselor, adults, kids.
Correct. Yes, both.
Please jump in on me. You know, if you sit, I know you can.
Yeah, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been in private practice for many years. Dates back to like 1985, but I've been on island here since 2011.
Oh,
and
okay.
When I first came here, I came here working for the Department of Health, and so I was the clinical psychologist for KMD for about 2 years and so forth, and I also was the acting.
He's going to probably tell you to speak up a little
Okay.
bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
There. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Yeah, just be yourself.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So anyways, I worked there for about 2.5 years. They hired me as a clinical psychologist for KMMD, and they also asked me to be the clinical director or acting clinical director for that time period. But eventually I went into private practice again, and happy doing so.
Well, I'm happy to have you on my show here. I know I say my show. This is your show. If you have things and people you think are interesting or should be brought up into the light, whether it's good or bad, we have interesting guests that talk. If you look back at the shows, you say, oh, look at all these different people. Some of the people that you know because they've been political in their past endeavors, some of them, but some in art, some in music, some in environment, some in energy. And in the arts, one of the arts is psychology. I must tell you, when I read your book, I said, The Psychology of Stupid by Santo Triolo. This came into my view just a few minutes ago. And on the cover, I don't know if you guys, can you see that? Can you get this on Amazon or have to come to
Yeah, on Amazon.
Okay, you see. The Psychology of Stupid. And this is written, as I was just looking through the index, you could probably lead me through better. Blind man running a radio thing? What is that? But these are all chapter titles. The Sticky Ego, Messages from Your Subconscious, The Confrontation. Sounds like psychology, but it's a novel? How is that all? The Rubber Band Theory of Socioeconomic Spectrum? I bet. Is it funny? Is it a story of someone?
Yeah, it's a novel, meaning that it's a fictitious component, but it's supposed to take place in the classroom, and you have a professor, and the professor covers different topics, and fictionally, the classroom is talking about contemporary psychology, but the aim here is to communicate things that are happening in the world in real life that are basically stupid. And the hope is to educate people through the novel to the point where they can make some changes, if they can make some changes in their lives. Now, when I say stupid, I'm talking about everybody, that we're all we're all in the same boat together, that we are sort of DNA-wise predisposed to doing things that are not very functional for us at this point. And
give me an example. An example.
Okay, for example, our DNA is based on immediate gratification. It's not based on long-term gratifications and so forth, right? So we're predisposed to find relief as soon as possible if there's certain things that cause us problems. So some people may turn to alcohol, others other drugs, or some people may do things that are, very detrimental to themselves later on in life. Now, where it comes from is from our ancient world. In the old days, you think about the caveman time, right? We were pretty low in the food chain. So we couldn't see as well as other animals. We couldn't, hear as well as other animals, smell as other animals. We certainly can't run as fast as other animals. We only had 2 legs. So chances were that you wake up in the morning and you may not be alive to see the sunset because you're going to be food for some animal somewhere. So, we're not interested at that level for long-term goals. So you see food, you eat it. You see what's in front of your nose, you just take advantage of what's in front of your nose. And long-term goals are not part of the DNA. So those are our ancestors. So what we see here in our communities is that people go for immediate relief rather than take the work and effort to understand what long-term consequences may be. It's just not part of our DNA. So that's just one example. Does it make sense?
That's a good example, but that's a big whitewash. That's what you're doing in here. You're taking different pieces of stupid and taking a look at them.
Yeah. So basically, where it came from was I had an interview a long time ago with a lady, and this is after the Sandy Hook massacre. Actually, this is I don't know if you remember. This is the first time that you had first graders and kindergartens being killed, and so she came to me with this this theme. This is it. Now we're going to turn the page. Now we're really going to make a difference because this is as far as our community, our society can handle it. And I just sort of shook my head. I said, I don't think so. We're going to still continue to see these problems and these issues. And so she asked me, do you believe in evil?
Do you believe in?
Evil. Is there evil in the world? And my response was, well, I can't discount it, but for the most part, people act because they're stupid. It's not evil. They just do stupid things. And so that was the beginning. That was the seed that prompted me to think about different aspects of human life where the book became the product, the outcome of it.
Well, that's interesting. That was a clinical definition. You wrote it because you wanted people to get up close and personal by themselves. Right. This is a self-help novel. Is that what you'd call it? I call it a self-help, what do you call it? Expose, journal by someone who has spoken to so many different people over time.
Yeah.
And has really seen that it boils down to oversight. No, it's stupid. You got to really have you put at the end of the book. Does our hero, or do you come to conclusions for people, or any kind of steps?
Yeah, I'll leave it for the readers to do the reading now and understanding. The thing that's important to hear is that you're not doomed. Okay. And even though there's a tendency to act stupidly, we also have the capacity to override that, okay? That's kind of an important thing. Now, when I give you, this is radio, I can just do this, and people can just imagine. When I do a lecture or so forth, I ask people to put their hand over their forehead.
Remember, that's your camera.
Okay.
So some people will see it. Put your hand over where?
Over your forehead. So your thumb, right? So what's behind your hand right there is what we call the prefrontal lobes, okay? The prefrontal lobes are in charge of, you can put your hand down. The prefrontal lobes are, they're in charge of your thinking, your processing, your deductive reasoning. It's the part of your brain that can plan ahead, that can calculate, can look at long-term consequences, analyze them, and so forth and so on. Now, here's the trick. That part of the brain is about 20%. The other 80% of the brain, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And so
Well, does that mean it really has no value except
it has
space?
wonderful value. It has wonderful value, but the important thing here is that part of the brain, that 20%, is really in charge of how you manage your emotions, how you manage your feelings, so forth and so on.
Wow.
And you want to hear even worse? If you just break it down to neurology, the wiring of our brain is it is 100% one way. So in other words, a neuron travels from east to west. It never goes from west to east. And you need another neuron to go from west to east, if you capture me. So these are all one-way streets.
Right. They're all one. Aren't most of our systems one way?
Right. So it's either one way or the other. And
well,
so
I
forth
say most of our systems.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Right.
Yeah. In contained vessels, they're one way.
Right. So the pathways from our frontal lobes to the rest of the brain is minute compared to the pathways from the rest of the brain to the frontal lobes. So what does that mean? That means for every street that goes one direction, we have 100 streets going the other direction. And that's the reason why people follow their emotions rather than stop, think things out, and come up with a more rational conclusion. You see what I'm saying? Does it make sense?
I think, it's really interesting that you say it's because of the way we're built.
Right.
That the emotional 80%, that we always heard everybody with their principles about the 80-20 rule. 20% of your people are going to do 80%. So you're telling me it's because we really only have 20% of a brain. It just so happens those numbers.
No, you have 100% of the brain.
Right.
It's
but
just
it only has
20% of it is able to do deductive
So
reasoning.
when someone says, you only use 10% of your brain, you could use more. You could use 100, imagine. But you say, hey, stop at 20. That's all you got. The other 80 is food.
Yeah. Another example.
What is the 80? I don't really understand. It's just emotion? It's pure out?
Yeah,
is that
it's
what
pure
you're
emotions.
It's pure out to the prefrontal lobe and that's it?
Right. So I'll give you an example that makes more sense in terms of, instead of neurology. Have you heard of the 7 deadly sins?
Yeah.
Everybody has, right?
Sure.
So I'm not sure if I can follow them. There's sloth and there's, greed and you know what they are and so forth. Well, do you have to go to school to learn about being greedy? Do you have to go to school? Do you have to read a chapter in a book to understand what it means to be envious? No, it just happens naturally. It's a natural thing that we humans have, that we're envious and so forth. Okay? So that's what I'm talking about, that 80%, that emotional wrappings and so forth. Does it make sense?
I do, but, in my life, as I've lived, it's not harness it. It's more like find out how it can synthesize into my active 20%, my emotional, whatever that is. It comes out in many ways. People are shy. They're over the top. All kinds of ways. I don't know how you describe it. There are places in the prefrontal that trigger different kinds of things, too. You're a specialist about ADHD, you mentioned.
That's correct.
You wrote a textbook? Tell me about that.
Okay, so that book is designed for practitioners. It's more statistically based and so forth. It's not for the general public. This one that I just wrote recently, the Psychology of Stupid, that's more for the general public.
Like in the computer world, this is called, what's that series? Ice cream cone eating for dummies. That's not quite ice cream cone eating for dummies.
Anyways, yeah, so...
Right, that's it. This is nice.
Yeah,
to me, this means user-friendly manual.
Right, so the ADHD book is mainly a textbook, and it's used for practitioners so they can make a proper diagnosis and then the proper treatment that goes with it, whether it's either medication or cognitive functioning and so forth and so on.
What was the last one? What kind of functioning?
Cognitive functioning.
Oh, whether it's cognitive functioning.
Thinking. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
I didn't hear.
No, that's
all
right. Thinking.
So that's an interesting question. How quick can you make a diagnosis? You've been sitting with me a few minutes.
This is not counting.
When I'm all over the map, you don't go, look at another patient.
Yeah, the diagnosis is a process and includes 3 things, okay? So one of them, if you would come to me, I would take a good history as to what's been going on with you, everything that's gone on in your life, growing up, dealing with teachers, what kind of classrooms you've had, and so forth and so on. So history can provide a lot of interesting, information as to how people are navigating through life. Okay, so that's the number one thing, which I think is kind of important. Then the second thing that I do is, and I invented this instrument for adults, is a standardized measure to help differentiate people who are ADHD from people who are not ADHD. Oh. Now, this is important. This is extremely important. And most doctors don't do that. They don't use the instrument appropriately. They don't have the standardized measure. Now, you know what I mean by standardized?
Sure, I do.
Okay.
In my understanding, over time, the standard changes based on, 100,000 of the most recent, and so it can adjust. But in our society now, you can measure when someone is
correct.
Is it a chemical thing, or is it questions? Or?
Yeah, it's a question thing. It's a combination of two things. Number one is a questionnaire that fulfills that kind of differentiation, and then number two, there's an exercise that you do. So if you come into my office, I would try to distract you on purpose, no offense, to see how well you can manage this and you can navigate through that, okay? Now, here's the important thing. If I go down the street and I ask people, have you ever lost focus? Have you ever forgotten your keys? Have you ever listened to a lecture and your mind sort of drifted off for your daydream? The answer is yes, it's happened, okay? So the real question is not whether these symptoms exist. The real question is how much. Get it? In other words, is it so destructive that
it's destructive?
It impedes your progress. It keeps you from fulfilling your goals. It causes problems with your job or your spouse or whatever. Okay, does that make sense?
They're measurable. I mean, when someone has those kinds of issues,
right,
they're measurable by things that are out of your control. So you're a path. You help them find the path and the right things to do, mostly?
Yeah, and also you look at what the environment is like, okay? So I had a patient years ago, wonderful guy, great guy, and he was very funny, too. He goes, I can't sit behind the desk. That's crazy, man. And his job was to go out with his truck, and he would cut down trees and, get firewood and so forth and so on. His wife... And I gave him credit for this. He says, you found the perfect woman for this, for your job and for your ailment. His wife was into details. She enjoyed details. So she did all of the paperwork. She did all of the finances. She did all of the, setting up the itinerary for the day. And in fact, he had, I don't know if they still have it or not. There's like a suction cup thing that you put on their dash in your windshield. And then you can write notes on it and so forth. Do you remember that?
I've seen on the internet, you see new variations of all that stuff.
Whatever.
Anyways,
yeah.
It's like having a notepad with you. Now
exactly.
They have cell phones.
Now they have cell
iPads.
phones and so forth. So she would set that up, okay? Yeah. Told them, get in the truck, take off. This is your assignment. Don't come back until the end of the list is finished.
Oh.
That kind of stuff. But she's a loving human being, really loving human being. It was a wonderful sort of connection between the two of them. So the environment actually made the big difference for him in terms of how he navigates through life. I left him alone. There's no need for treatment. His best treatment was his wife. I gave a lecture one time, and this is for a school, and we're talking about children that have ADHD and so forth, right? And I told the people there, I said, I can solve ADHD problems, or at least at the 50% level, with just a snap of our fingers. All you have to do is hire a private secretary for these kids, and they got it made in a shade. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. So, is ADHD a real thing? Yes, it is. Is it chemically based? Yeah, it is chemically based. Some people have a disposition where they're, they do fairly well, and other people not so much. But there's a spectrum here. And at what point do you reach a point where it really interferes with your life? It makes a difference, where you don't reach your potential, where your goals are not met and so forth and so on. When that happens, that's where the clinical component comes in. And that's where I come in terms of providing whatever treatment is necessary.
I've had a couple of friends, one specifically, a young lady who was 50s, who in her 40s was told she had ADHD and took some kind of a chemical treatment to change something, and it's really helped her a lot. And I've heard other people try to deal with it in natural ways and all kinds of ways. So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, I'm sure, right?
No, it's not, right.
But you're thinking that most people, does it take a little time to talk them to a point where they are more aware of, like you said, a private secretary? Yeah, you know what that means? You could tell him, this guy's running so quick, he just needs something to jot down what he's doing. So as I'm an adult with all this, who evaluates ADHD? A teacher? A mother and a father?
Clinician. A licensed clinician is the one that
So you're generally getting referrals. Yeah,
Right.
Mostly kids, mostly adults?
I have both. I have a mixture of both because I have a reputation with kids first and then with adults. Actually, how I wrote the book and how I wrote the instrument, not this book, the one with Stupid, came from a study that I did way back when. It's 1988. And what we did was we looked at two medications. One was Cylert, which we don't use anymore. It's Pemoline, what was used. And the other one was Ritalin that everybody knows. And then we had a control group. It was a double-blind study. So when we got done with the statistics, the analysis and so forth, we broke the code because it was a double-blind study. And we told the parents, what group they were in, what your kid was getting, and what are some of the things that we would recommend and so forth. And as we talked about the kid, I would see the wife would sort of look at her husband and say, and point to him and go like, I think that's him. I think that's my husband. And there is a tendency for men to have ADHD over women, although that's really debatable, and that goes into another category altogether. But even the guys would say, you're describing my kid, but you're actually describing me 25 years ago. That was me and so forth. And then they asked me, they said, well, can I take these tests too? And I said, no, you can't. This is normed for children. He said, well, if you come up with something, I'll be happy to help. And that's how it all started. So it took me, I didn't realize how long it was going to take to get the norms, but it took me 9 years to go around the country and, get the proper norms and so forth. And then I had to validate the norms because, that's my baby. And validation means that, you need to find somebody outside to say, hey, you know what, Dr. Triolo, it's worth it. Go ahead and publish it, that kind of thing.
Right.
And it took me a while to find somebody that would be willing to do that. And my partner and now my big friend is Kevin Murphy, Dr. Kevin Murphy from the University of Massachusetts. Great little story I got to tell you. Hope you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
Okay. After going to about 3 or 4 different doctors to try to, normalize it, especially people that are working at the university setting, I was led to Dr. Murphy, and he accommodated me. He said, "Fine, I'll do it." We used a lot of his patients and so forth to validate it, and he came out with the good results. Years later, I found out that he had skin cancer. And the doctors gave him just a few months to live. He was stage 4. And he had all the reason in the world to reject me, but he didn't. And I'm happy to say he's still alive. And he's doing really, really well. Great story. Yeah. So
that's a good story.
So he's special in my heart for many, many reasons.
That's a beautiful story. So you've been on Maui. How'd you pick Maui?
Maui picked me. Yeah, so I had a practice in Columbus, Georgia, for many years. And my mother died unexpectedly. And speaking of cancer, she died of cancer. My father, who was the sickler of the two, who had congestive heart failure, diabetes, he was on dialysis and so forth, he was alive. He stayed alive. And the doctor said he can't stay by himself because my mom was taking care of him.
Oh,
and he refused to leave the home. I mean, he was a classic Italian. How would I describe it? Frank Sinatra is the best example I can give you, except that Frank Sinatra was a fake. I mean, he was just an actor. This guy was real. At any rate, he just refused. He says, I want to die. Just let me die. I want to stay right here. So of all my siblings, I was able to, financially leave my practice and take care of them. So for about 2.5 years, maybe a little bit more than that, I took care of them. And then, I was a free agent, and I applied to different places. And there's another book that I wrote on my kid who leaned me towards Hawaii. And I was willing to take any job that anybody would hire me at that point. I was kind of running out of money and so forth. I got a home equity loan. I kind of, the business, right?
Sure.
Anyways, I got invited by the Department of Health, and the rest is history.
Well, there's a guy, Lauren Pang from over here.
Yeah, of course.
He's been a guest here. In fact, he is one of the very most, I call him diplomatic. They don't like to invite him to public forums because he puts it right to them. He just puts his facts out. To me, that's the hammer. It's not that he's really trying to, put a whip out. But when you put out the truth, I do really like him. He's that whole thing with the West Side and all the toxins, and now everyone's moving back to their lands in Los Angeles. Let them back on their lands. And they're going to end up like we've seen it happen all around the world, these toxic situations, and here. And how do you deal with all these things? People come in and talk about, the world, Trump's coming in, I don't know how I'm going to pay this. What's going to happen to this? My prices are going up. Or do they come in and say, I've learned so much from you. I'm going to relax because this may be the point where we start to love each other, like you thought years ago, right?
Right.
Are we fooling ourselves, or are we going to, once again, what is it? When you pour something, if it looks like it's going over the hill, it could go over the hill. Jacques Cousteau thought it was too late. He stopped. He said, I had all that I could take. I'm out of here. Do you still think we have a chance out of our world?
There's always a hope. There's always a hope. I mean, we still have, the frontal lobes, right? So as long as we exercise it. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because hopefully the book will it will outlast me. I'm going to be long gone pretty soon, right? So maybe there's something in the archives there that people can pick up. And it's not just a self-help. It's just an analysis of trying to be aware of what's going on. So one of the chapters in there deals with commercials. What do commercials do? How do they try to fool you out of your money? What are some of the things, what are the tactics that they use? Why should I buy a car because my favorite actor is on television telling me this is a great car?
That's right.
Right?
My butt fits good in this seat. That's right.
Yeah. So, you have these special techniques that people use, and it's really interesting that they're very easily fooled. Like, for instance, this is the last weekend, come and get, or, it's not going to last forever, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And what they're trying to do is put some tension inside of you so that you can make the decision right away to spend
You
your
only
money.
have 38 minutes until you can make a decision, then this price is going away. And it's 90% less than we normally charge. Oh, yes, we do make up the numbers all here. We are just... It is outrageous. Someone told me someone mentioned something, and and he swore that it was this actor. Oh, it was Robert Kennedy. He swore that it was Robert Kennedy talking about healthy things, and he bought pills, and they charged him thousands of dollars. Oh, I feel out of touch with the real. Are most people feeling out of touch with real relationships?
No, it's just that they can get sucked into these type of things. So if you exercise that frontal lobe, there's a chapter in there, it's called, it's a spoof, and it's called, I'm thinking, life insurance for nuclear thermal annihilation. So if you happen to be in thermonuclear annihilation, they're going to pay out. Good for you. So
this is going to be a fun book to read. I look forward to it. You know, the Holy Trinity of psychology. You have the Holy Trinity?
Yeah. So basically, I'm a psychologist. It took years and years to get the degree and everything. But basically, it boils down to three things. That's it. So one of them is emotions. And people come to me because of panic attacks or anxiety or depression, whatever. They're emotions, right? So that's one of the three. The other one is what we're talking about right now is cognition, thinking, being able to get a perspective of what's going on, understanding, having insights and what have you. And the third is behaviors. And most people do very, very well understanding their emotions cognitively, understanding the insights, getting the insights. But translating that into actual behaviors, that's a toughie. That's a real toughie. So how many people do you know? Like, for instance, my doctor told me that my cholesterol's too high. I need to change my diet. I need to do this and that. They know it. It's not that they're not stupid. But behavior-wise, you have all of these habits that you have to
That's your 80 again.
That's not just ADHD. No. It's part of our DNA.
No, I meant the 80 with the brain. It's
like,
wait a minute.
With the brain,
you're
right.
being emotional. You're being emotional, and you're overriding that wisdom you just gained.
And it's not just emotions. It's just a natural tendency to go with what you've been doing for years and years, as opposed to, like my father, for example, when he was first diagnosed as having diabetes. I was working in a clinic. This is pre-doctoral, before I became a doctor, so it was a pre-doctoral internship and stuff. So I had all these pamphlets, and I showed up, and I tried to tell him about, your diet and everything else. And when I got to the point where you have to stop eating pasta, which turns into sugar, he looks at me and says, I'd rather just die. He says, I'm Italian. I got to have my pasta and so forth. And it was really hard to get him to change. The poor guy was really suffering in that regard. And so finally, how I got to him, I said, you're not going to die all at once, Dad. They're going to, you might go blind, or they might have to cut off your legs. It's just piece by piece. And eventually, after 10, 15 years or whatever, you might die. But it's not going to be pleasant. It's going to be a very hurtful experience. And that was a sobering component that changed him.
Oh,
and
that's great.
He did well. He lived 20-some years with diabetes, more than that, actually. So,
diabetes isn't not necessarily a natural condition at all, right?
Well, I'm not the expert on this, so I'm not a medical doctor,
right.
so I don't know about that. Yeah,
that's it. Me, I'm the no doctor, so I can say anything.
Yeah, but I will tell you, it runs in my family. Okay, but I went to Sicily, and
everyone eats pasta.
Well, not only do they eat pasta, but they're running around. They're doing things. I had a couple of cousins that lived into their 90s, and they were farming up until their 90s. That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. Neither one of them could drive. They didn't have a car. When I was a little boy and I went to my mother's village in Sicily, the only car that was available was a doctor's car, and he just made the rounds from different villages and so forth. So everybody had donkeys and so forth. So there was exercise that intervened here, and the environment forced you to eat sugars or eat starch or whatever to keep up to have the energy that you need. Well, here in the United States, people take their car to the driveway to pick up the mail
and sit at their desk and come home. Yeah. Right. And they drive to the mail. That's right.
So there's a component of how the environment is and how it treats you as well. Yeah. So my father was a diabetic. His mother was a diabetic. There's a lady in Sicily right now who's 101 years old. She's my second cousin, I think second or third cousin. I'm not sure. And she, as far as I've known her, she was a diabetic. I don't remember when she started, and she was insulin dependent and so forth. But 101 years old. So when we stayed to live with her, She woke up before everybody else. She went to her backyard, which was a beautiful garden and so forth, picked up, all the berries and fresh vegetables and so forth, washed them clean and everything. And by the time we were up, she had a nice little bowl for everybody to eat, and that was his breakfast. That was her breakfast as well. Kind of neat, it's a neat way to live.
I have a friend that moved with a gal to Portugal, and just it seems that other countries and the different temperament and country area in Italy. I have another couple of Maui people, that moved there and don't want to come back. It's just too beautiful.
Well, you know what? Maui reminds me of Sicily in a lot of ways.
Really?
Yeah, it does. It does. Just there's so many people here who are in tune to nature. They're more in tune than the mainland. And I really appreciate that. There are a lot of people here who really respect each other. I love the term family ohana. It goes more than just the blood. It's the connection that you make. And Sicily is the same way. There's this thing called compadre. And the compadre means, like, for instance, if I have a child and and I want you to baptize that child, that means that we're connected. We may not be connected via blood, but we're family already. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
You've heard of the term Cosa Nostra, right?
Sure.
Our thing. Our thing means that it belongs to us. It's us. And it's a special kind of community that I'd really enjoy. And, I don't go there very often. I wish I could, but but when I do go, it's like, open arms. And it's kind of beautiful. It's kind of, and I'm part of that culture. I'm part of that, process.
We got plenty of time. You guys out there that have been listening and watching know that sometimes at the end of the show, they start a little later or younger with the timing, and I can't see very well. When I look up and I see 3, it could be that's an 8. Or I could look up and see an 8 and it's a 3. But I think I'm doing good. I know exactly where to go to get it right, so I'm good. So when I think about this, you want to pick a chapter and share it in some special way? I want to give you some time and floor so that you can share something that you feel is really specifically important and might give these guys an entree into you. Do you want to give any web address or any kind of stuff like that?
I can give my telephone number. They can reach me through telephone number.
I guess you could do that, but I'm just saying because it's going to be on radio. It's not going to be on the TV, but if do you have a web address or anything like that for you?
I do have it. Dr. Watson basically would answer that question better than me because he's the one that, put it together and so forth. But,
okay. That's a really, Dr. Watson, I think I shared with you, I thought of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
You guys, Dr. Graham Watson came and talked to Susie here. Susie is here in the front. Beautiful lady who listened and heard about Dr. Santo Triolo, and then when I didn't hear back, and I thought, I haven't scheduled Monday yet. Let me call him, and I got you directly. I'm so glad you were able to come on short notice. I know I haven't read the book, but that's yet because I'm going to enjoy reading it.
Okay, so chapter 1. Let's just do it. Chapter 1.
Sure.
Where I talk about the difference between intelligence and wisdom, okay? So if you don't mind me reading it.
No,
okay?
Please.
Okay. With intelligence, you can build skyscrapers, computers, bridges, solve complex mathematical problems, and make new medications. With wisdom, you can enjoy humor, maintain a loving heart, shed away the approaching stench of old age, listen to the symphonies of life, and dance with the universe. Make sense?
Yeah. Well, that was chapter 1, or was just
that was chapter 1.
Okay.
So, does it make sense?
Well, I think that it's beautiful because it gives people room to put themselves into it. When you're using prose like that, dancing with the universe. Do you have a clientele? I always wonder who's going to be most interested in picking this up. Someone who's interested in just having fun as funny, someone that's interested in more textbook self-enjoyment? Do you have a picture of your audience?
I think the general public is the picture that I have in my audience. I think that, people that you were talking about what's going on with this country and how things are going with the administration and so forth. And there's a lot of despair. There's a lot of not just anger, but lost hope and so forth. I have someone that came to me. Of course, I'm not going to mention any names,
sure.
But she went overboard. She said, they're going to take away my vote because they hate women. Everything about this guy is against women. And I didn't have the heart to tell her they're going to take my vote too. It doesn't matter. So, anyways, I'm going to try just give you one more thing. It says it's chapter 2, taking humanity to the moon, and I don't have to read it. I can just basically tell you.
Yeah.
I want you to think about this. Charles Lindbergh went across. You know who he is, right? He was the first solo flight across the Atlantic, became famous and so forth.
You guys know Charles Lindbergh?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So when he came back, one of the first things he did was to go to Ohio and meet up with Wilbur Wright, one of the Wright brothers. By that time, his brother had died. And he wanted to praise him for what he did because that, catapulted him to do what he did. And so fast forward to 1969, we had, what's his name, Armstrong, who was going to be on the moon. Neil Armstrong, that's right. And so Charles Lindbergh was invited to the launching of Apollo 11. Now think about this. Think about the technology involved. We went from mechanized flight in like 1902 to sending a man to the moon and back 1969. That's less than a lifetime.
Yes, it is.
Right? In that time period, okay, and even beyond that, like the phone that you have in front of you, the mechanisms inside that little phone is far more sophisticated than anything that they had in that module going to the moon. So when it comes to chemical engineering, when it comes to mechanical engineering and so forth, we really do a fantastic job. But when it comes to human engineering, people are still jealous of other people. People are still greedy. People are still crying over things that, people have done to them years and years and years ago. The human engineering part has not advanced. And that's an important thing. That's one of the things that I point out in the book, that we have the technology, we've done the technology of things that are not human. We've advanced so much, so much. But when it comes to the human being, we haven't advanced that much. And of course, like I said, I can't live forever. So one of the motivations for the text, for the book, is to just outlive me. And hopefully it's doing more than collecting dust on a shelf.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Well, not only does it make sense, I think about the future and I say, well, technology is now what it is, and it's made life easier and easier and compartmentalize people into separateness and little boxes, and they're not antisocial. They just don't have any experience with other humans.
Right.
So it creates a whole other thing. And with these emotions being our big driver,
right,
it's like, what's going to happen to people in this age when their jobs where they're paring the government down? It is clear with all these less jobs there'll be less money, but all these people, unless they're all artists and we're all going to buy art from each other, or we'll have food and we'll have enough food, but everything's not possible. So what is going to happen? I ask that in real mystery. If you have a crystal ball, bring it out now.
No, we did have a crystal ball. Yeah, but I think the Buddhists have a good answer, though. The Buddhists have, when they interview and they talk about Tibet and how the Chinese government is treating the people in Tibet and so forth, how do you find peace in your heart when you have your people, hurt the way they have been hurt? And the answer is that they stay within themselves. That in my heart, in my being, who I am as a human being, I find a lot of peace. I have sort of a general policy, and you don't have to buy it. This is just me, okay? I work really hard to surround myself with people that are decent and honest and nice. And, I'm going to come across people that want to take advantage of me. I know I'm going to come across people that are kind of stupid and, they're greedy and whatever it happens to be. But I just have self-respect, and I just put a wall there. And I wish them well, but I don't want to deal with them. I don't want to get involved with them. I don't want to make deals with them. I don't want to. Do you see what I'm saying?
Have you been able to maintain that distance on an island when people want something from you that you don't want to give them? This being a trapped little world here on Maui has created I don't want to say Cosa Nostra, a sub-community of, and it's not even wanters. It's people. There are two kinds of homeless, or maybe a few kinds of homeless now, right? Mm-hmm. But there's some that are homeless by design, and they're consciously, is that evil? I don't know. What do you call that?
I don't know. It's up to them. I mean, I consider homeless just a condition. I have to find out who that person is and why that person made choices that led to being homeless.
Can you help most people? Is there any program, by example, coordinated with Maui Correctional Center to be able to help
in
people?
In my field, the area where we stay away from is the antisocial personality disorders, the sociopaths. And what we found over history is that the more you try to help them, the more sophisticated they become. So they know the game, they can play the game, and so forth and so on. So you're actually not helping them. You are. You're helping them destroy other people and take advantage of other people.
You're giving them tools.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's really kind of interesting because most of life is not that complicated. You can get those insights very easily after about 2 sessions, 3 sessions, maybe a month at the most. People are pretty smart; they figure it out. But then the behaviors. How do you overcome the habits? That kind of stuff.
Change environment?
Either change environment or, practicing, keep practicing. Even if you mess up, just keep practicing and do the best you possibly can. But that behavioral component is the hard one to overcome.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? You get
Absolutely.
It? Yeah. And I had a lady a long, long time ago who came to me, and you've heard of Women Helping Women here, right?
Sure.
Okay. Well, they had a shelter for women over in Georgia, and they had strict rules. If you come there and you need help, they'll help you. If you leave, go back to the perpetrator, or, your husband, whatever that happens to be.
Can't come a second time.
You can go a second time, but that's it. That was the final straw. So I had this lady that was referred to me because she just kept on knocking on the door. And she's already used up her, 1 time, 2 times. And we sat together, and I tried to help her as best as I possibly could. And at one point she said, yeah, I know it's wrong. I know it's wrong to go back to my husband. But you don't understand, doctor. I can't help loving him. And my response to her was, okay, I don't want you to stop loving him. If that's what you do, if that's what you really feel in your heart, to love him, that's fine. I just want you to be safe. What is it that you need to do to be safe? And so I split it up. You can continue feeling the love, but do things so that you don't end up in the hospital again.
Got through.
Okay. Finally got through. But still, it took a long time. Maybe I'm not as good as I need to be, whatever. But we finally got to that point where she began to look at 2 separate things. That, just because you love someone doesn't mean you have to live with that person. Does it make sense?
Well, it makes sense. I guess I'm a Jewish kid from New York. These kind of things, we were kids. We were doing. When I hear about this coming later in life, I go back to the thing about stupid. We're stupid because of environment. Do you find they follow the lead from before? I always wonder what it is that creates this level of problem that they. What do you find?
It's not in the book, which I wish I did put it in the book. We people are, how do I put this? We're not leaders as much as we're followers. We like to be part of the crowd. We like to fit in. It's very, very important for us to fit in. There was a guy by the name of Milgram who was Jewish. And his theme was that after World War II, that the Germans really are not all that bad. There may be some bad apples, but as a people, they're not bad people. And he wanted to prove that. So he came up with an experiment. What he did was he set up an experiment where you had a teacher. Do we have enough time?
Oh, we did.
Okay.
Yeah, I keep looking only because of my,
Okay.
I'm afraid I'm going to have the wall suddenly. Okay.
So where you had a teacher, and a student. And the teacher would give questions. The student had to answer the question. If the teacher, if the student gave the wrong answer, then the teacher would give a mild shock. And there was a panel there. And every time you get a wrong answer, you move up on the shock panel. Okay, so from the left it's mild. On the right, you had a skull and crossbones and everything. It says danger and all that stuff marked red. And so the whole idea was to see how far the person would go. Now, the student was really not a student. He was not a subject. He was a stooge. He was, he was a Confederate. So he was part of the experiment.
Right.
But the teacher did not know. He was the subject. And these poor people, they were told by someone wearing a white coat and everything, just keep going, just keep going, keep going. Even though the student or the stooge would start screaming. I said, I have a heart condition. They'd stop this. Please stop this. They would just keep on going and keep on going. Now, he did this in New York. And the reason why he did it in New York was to cut out all the, to take care of all the rough spots before he took it to Germany. Well, guess what? The experiment never made it to Germany because he realized that following the authority of others and so forth is ubiquitous. It's not just Germans, it's everybody. And think about it. This was in Manhattan where everybody thinks that they're independent thinkers. So of all the places, to find this kind of obedience, he found it.
So what are we going to do here in America? Are we going to have an unprecedented...
Well, think about this, okay? I don't know if this makes sense to you or not. Dictators are only dictators if people comply and they're obedient. What if people that work for ISIS says, I'm not going to go to this university and put this professor in handcuffs just because he disagrees with the government?
Now, I hear you, but you also talked about, when you think about Germany, of those that, remember they say, look, that's my neighbor, but someday they're going to come for you. Here we are. Is that same kind of concept?
Yeah. But basically just human, I'm not going to shoot this guy because he's protesting.
What does it take?
Well, it takes you have to overcome your DNA to not be obedient, and you have to overcome the DNA to say, look, no, I'm not going to do this. Just recently, this is the Vietnam War. I don't know if you remember that, but I think you do. You're my age, right?
I sure do.
We put up with a new policy. If your commander tells you to do something that is morally wrong, you have the right to say, no, I'm not going to follow that order. And that's what it takes. That's what it takes here. You have all these things happening right now, people being, incarcerated for no reason at all, or, their green cards are taken away from them.
So all that's going to create a time now that is unprecedented in our world, and we all have to, like you say, take a look. Where are you happiest? When you look within, when you're thankful for who and what you've got and where you are, and the friends that you've got, and the possibilities of doing better.
I agree.
We only have 2 minutes, the real 2 minutes. First of all, Santo Triolo, Dr. Santo Triolo, thank you for coming to my show.
It's my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
I hope that you'll consider not only coming back to me. We have a lady, a Dr. Valerie Simonson, who's on Thursday at this time. And it may be, maybe soon or maybe whenever. I think you should see her because she's a very interesting woman, and she has a foundation called You Know More. And I've known her for, God knows, 25 years, since we were both children, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And, of course, this wasn't my Steven Van Zandt or Pancho Villa outfit. This is because of that giant hole they made, the Trump coin slot. I was a gumball machine, and now I'm coming back, and my everything will be perfect. I had a doctor at Kaiser, Ryan Leary, who did it. Just a great, above and beyond the call of duty. Thank you, Dr. Leary. Not Timothy Leary, Ryan Leary. Nice man.
Is he still around, Timothy Leary?
No, he's gone.
He's gone. Oh.
I had a friend of mine, Ed Elkin, who was there in that crowd with Ram Dass and Timothy Leary.
He was a Harvard professor. You knew that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And some of the instruments.
Got 40 seconds. Good.
Right.
Some
of the instruments he invented, I've actually used for my dissertation. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was big on family.
My first thing when I was in college was studying LSD. That was really something. 30 seconds. The Psychology of Stupid.